I started out my writing career writing primarily about business and entrepreneurship and branding and very ground level fundamental businessy things like this. And so when I started to write science fiction, I had a lot of my existing readers looking at me with puzzlement and writing me angry emails saying, "Why on earth are you wasting your time like this? I used to enjoy your writing. I used to subscribe to your newsletters. Now it's worthless. These things that you're doing are just puerile entertainment." And I have to give them a look of puzzlement in return, because what could be more fundamental to doing business and to living in the real, concrete, productive world than being able to imagine what's going to happen next? I'm Colin Wright, and you are watching Consider This. I think there's a major misconception about fiction as a whole, not just science fiction. There's this idea that people read it just as pure escapism, and though there's an element of that, I absolutely love reading fiction for pleasure, for enjoyment, but there's also an element of growth inherent in the act of reading fiction, of imagining the way that things could be, or the way that things will be, or the way that things could have been if not for something else. There's actually been a great deal of research done that shows this, that reading fiction of any kind, particularly before going to sleep, but at any time of day really, actually increases your cognitive capacity for the next several days. So you actually think better as a result of reading fiction. And the why of this, they think anyway, is that it allows you to imagine things that aren't real. If you go out into the world and you see concrete things, you know that they're there. Whereas if you're reading words and you're decoding iconography, the iconography of the letters that are used to make the words, and then imagining something that isn't there yet, you are training your brain to imagine how things could be. And can you imagine a better skill, a better exercise for an entrepreneur, for somebody who's trying to make anything, than imagining the world as it would be if something changed, than imagining how you might solve a problem that has not yet been solved? And I would argue that there's a reason that a lot of the great minds in business right now are people who grew up with things like Star Wars and Star Trek in particular, and authors like Heinlein and Clarke. These are people who grew up imagining a better world. A lot of the root, the basis of science fiction, modern science fiction in particular, is the hippies. And they were imagining utopias and how these new technologies might enable us to take this next step and to live better lives, to evolve humanity as a society. Science fiction allows us to do that. It allows us to get out of ourselves, to get out of the way things are, and say, okay, if we take away this concreteness, if we stop forcing ourselves inside of this box of the way things are, how might things be if we could change this? And perhaps most valuable, particularly when we are increasing the level of technology within society, science fiction allows us to imagine the moral and philosophical implications of a change, of a technological evolution before it actually occurs. And so as we as a people are struggling with the morality of, say, autonomous cars or artificial intelligence, we've got many, many tomes full of stories told about these very subjects. And we can look at these, and it may not be the way that would actually work in real life, but it allows us to go through and work out some of the potential consequences of these actions beforehand, so that maybe we can make better decisions when it happens in real life. A great example of this is Isaac Asimov's 3 Laws of Robotics, which he coined in his book I, Robot, and then that it kind of propagated throughout his other stories. But the idea was to show that no matter how you rationally describe these laws for robots, life will overcome. Even if you set something that seems very concrete and foolproof, there's always a way around it. That was the entire point of iRobot, was to show how very rational rules can be overcome. And what we can learn from that, what we can take from this, is that as we build our own rules and our own systems and our own artificial intelligences, maybe we have to be a little bit more flexible with the rules. Something rational and concrete will not necessarily be foolproof the way that we think it will be. Writing science fiction, then, for me, is not just something that's entertaining and interesting. It's something that allows me to challenge myself to imagine what if. If this thing changed, if we invent simulated universes with fully realized artificial intelligences, what does that look like? What happens? What happens on the personal scale? What happens on the technological scale, the business scale, the governmental scale? How does it change things? What does that look like? And then what happens after that? And forcing myself to imagine the world in this way, to think 20 steps ahead, is something that's useful in every single thing that I do. In the businesses that I get myself involved with, in the decisions that I make on a personal level, and how I choose to live my life, how I choose to grow as an individual. It's all informed by this same ideation process, the process of saying, what if? What if I changed this thing? What would happen then? Fiction is not mindless entertainment. It's something that happens to be entertaining, but it's also something that allows us to grow as business people, as tech enthusiasts, as people who are trying to imagine anything that is not yet concrete. So creators and makers of all kinds, fiction helps us grow. Far from being puerile entertainment, I would argue that science fiction, and fiction of all kinds, is actually just a full workout for the brain. It's something that allows us to exercise muscles that otherwise don't get utilized very often. Knowing this, all we have to decide is how many reps we want to do. I've put some links to some of my favorite science fiction books in the description below. If you would like to share your own recommendation, leave those in the comments so other people can check out your favorite authors. If you want to find out more about me, and my work, my books, and my blog, etc., you can go to colin.io. And if you want to find me elsewhere on the internet, on Instagram and Tumblr and Snapchat, pretty much everywhere, you can go to Colin is my name. That's the case everywhere except Facebook, where it's just Colin Wright. Thanks, guys.